A Red Bull, you say? What about a coffee? Hello, everybody. Welcome to another stream. My name, of course, is Alma Hexblade, your head guildmaster and chief barista. Happy Friday, everybody. You made it to another week. I hope you guys had a good time. Week's over. Weekend begins. And some last bit of learning before we start off the weekend, I suppose. Welcome. We have a bunch of topics today. Let me see, what did I put on? I keep writing like what I put on the docket and then immediately forget what I put on the tweet. So what did I write? Seda Express, the public domain, spider eyes, helicopters, beverage cans, fake food, Lake Mead. I already said helicopters. Solid state cooling, heart lining, 3D printing, the Italian Renaissance, a piano made using plasma, boomer shooters, and funny Nintendo patents. There's a lot of topics. There's a lot of topics. And of course, we gotta start because we kind of gotta dig through that backlog. You guys post... I post a lot of videos, you guys post a lot of videos, and it just makes this giant backlog of stuff. And why is this screen not aligned right? Hold on. That's so weird. Why is this wrong? Let me fix that, hold on. What? I don't know why it got so big. Can I lock it? Hey. Internship project proposed. Ooh! What's your Goliath, what you interning for? What you doing? If you can't tell us, also, you know, don't tell us. There we go, I got it all working again. Now I just need to turn off this now playing button, and we good. Okay, so this one is spooky. Spooky boogie. It's about Lake Mead and the spooky things. API for machine learning bug detection. Oh, that's cool. Yo, that's better than whatever the hell I did in universities. Kill it. Like, hell yeah. Oh, what the hell? Move, stupid. Hold on. I never understood why this never worked. Yeah, you're gonna slay it. Oh, literally bug detection. Oh, okay. So, ooh, yeah, that's not that bad. Oh yeah, you'll draw. Hey Rose, how's it going? We only started soon, don't worry. So yeah, this one is a spooky. It's about, I think dead bodies in Lake Mead, which is a national park in the United States. But bug detection, that's cool. It's like little, what, CV, that would be, what, Open Vision, and then some machine learning, and then a database of a bunch of bugs. Oh, it's a lot of bugs. All right. All right, I'm not scared too badly of bugs, except when they bite me, then I get terrified, but... Oh, it's only bugs that are pesticle. Oh, okay, locust detector. Well, to be honest, it's kind of easy to spot locusts. It's literally a worrying swarm. All right. Let's watch this one. This is about the secrets of Lake Mead. When I'm guessing when they say secrets, they mean dead skeletons in the water, so... Locusts are easy. When you see them, it's too late. True. These are auto-generated captions. Sorry.
Hello again, and welcome back to the second channel. Now, unless you've been intentionally avoiding the news this past year, I'm sure many of you have probably come across today's topic. It's this ever-growing situation that's budding out of Lake Mead in Las Vegas. It's been
Las
quite
Vegas.
Interesting saga thus far.
Why
And
was I
even if
thinking
you've
about something
never been to
else?
Vegas, pretty much everybody's heard of the Hoover Dam, so I'm sure many people have become familiar with what's been going on this past year.
It's also new in
That being
Vegas.
said, though, throughout the frenzy of discussion swirling about this online, I've yet to find a single video or anything comprehensive that seems to tie this saga together.
I have
In
no
case you're
idea
not
what
familiar
this
with
is,
what's
so
been
I'm
going
very
on,
curious.
Essentially, Lake Mead in Nevada is the world's largest man-made water reservoir, but as of recently, that title may only be a tentative one, as today, satellite images show that the lake has essentially become a shell of its former self. This is rather concerning, as Lake Mead is not only a key source of water for residents of Las Vegas, but also people in parts of Arizona, California, and even some parts of Mexico.
Spooky, scary.
Back in the year 2000, the water level held at a depth of around 1,200 feet, but as of July of 2022, the water level dropped to a new low at 1,044 feet. But this 20-year downward trend would really only catch the general public's attention on May 1st, 2022.
Whoa.
It's uncharted waters for Metro's Homicide Division.
None of us have encountered this before, where we're going to
I don't
have
remember this.
a
I
deceased
don't.
individual who's
I don't
been
remember this.
underwater for, upwards of potentially 40 years.
And a discovery that never seemed possible.
Had the water
Ew.
level not receded so far, we never make the discovery of this victim.
40 years ago, where this barrel with human remains inside sits, was roughly 100 feet underwater and several hundred yards from shore.
Now, someone had to have a boat, and someone had to, put someone in the barrel and push them off the boat.
Could it stem from organized crime or something completely different? That's what Lieutenant Ray Spencer's team will dig into, if they can extract DNA from the remains.
If you notice, I'm saying if, because it will be a very challenging part of this investigation.
Naturally, this discovery gave rise to massive amounts of speculation, as this spawned countless discussions about a mob tide of disappearances in and around the late 70s and early 80s, as this barrel method of disposal has a rich history within the American mafia. But just as the general public was able to digest this first discovery, that was when another discovery of human remains would be found, and then another, and another, and to date, as we come to the end of 2022, 6 different discoveries of human remains have been found at Lake Mead, all within the same year.
It's a lot of bodies. If the jokes are all in the delivery, it's true. Are these real skeletons or meme skeletons? Because I feel like I've seen these guys. One of them's holding a Budweiser.
If this scene looks somewhat familiar, it's because it's the source of that one meme.
Yeah.
For years,
Oh.
scuba divers at Lake Mead have made it a point to decorate the lake with fake skeletons to give divers something to look at while they're learning or for the occasional spook. It's a pretty common prank that you'll often see in pretty much any freshwater lake, and there's quite a bit of creativity that goes into a lot of these scenes and Easter eggs they create for other divers.
Real life Easter eggs.
But with the frequency of real bodies being found this past year, it's all fun and games until you realize just how many real bodies are still sitting at the bottom of the lake.
Huh.
And while much of the media attention has been focusing on the story through the lens of organized crime, so far there's actually been no confirmed evidence that ties any of this to the mafia. While the body in the barrel is perhaps the strongest candidate, we'll only know for certain with a positive ID. And with the other discoveries made thus far, none of those show any hallmarks at all. And as a bit of a side note, you should also know that there's a history of people using barrels as a disposal method to cast suspicion towards the mafia, even when it wasn't actually them.
Oh, wow. Huh. It's like baiting.
So while DNA
or
tests
something.
stay pending, the body in the barrel case is really a case that's a needle in a haystack with heavy amounts of speculation. All we really know for sure in this case was that the man's clothing was sold at a Kmart in and around the mid to late 1970s, and he sustained a single shot to the head. While it's presumed that the man passed away in and around the same time period, for all we know, those clothes could have been received secondhand. And generally speaking, dating the post-mortem interval of bodies found in water for extended periods of time is often incredibly difficult due to things like adipocere. But that being said, at the time of me making this video, there is one primary candidate that has seen some reporting. that being a man by the name of Robert Eugene Shaw.
Bones.
As reported by his sister, he did
Bones.
apparently have mob ties and disappeared on May 14th, 1977. He disappeared when he decided to go on a car ride from Fontana to Las Vegas with a friend. Both of them haven't been seen since. And while this is a lead, it raises a lot of other questions like what happened to the other person that he was with and so on. Admittedly, there's not a lot of information about his disappearance or who he was even with at the time. There's definitely something to be said about this body in the barrel case when the main lead has virtually no information. While this one has kind of stuck in terms of reporting, the only other information that's been dug up about him is that he seems to have had some involvement with the culinary union strikes in 1976. The head of this labor union and strike was a mob-connected union leader named Al Bramlett. Bramlett was known for being ruthless in orchestrating bombings with restaurants that would not cooperate with unionization efforts. But at the end of the strike, he ultimately ended up on the wrong side of the Chicago outfit, which ultimately led to his demise. And while that's an interesting side story, all this documentation really shows was that Robert E. Shaw was involved with the labor union strike. It places him within close proximity to the mafia's operations, but it's not necessarily like proof of a mob tie. The labor union at the time represented around 22,000 workers. As it stands today, DNA tests have been pending since August of 2022, with no word back. But I should add that the LVPD has also solicited a number of other families as well. It's just no further details have been revealed thus far. And with you now caught up to speed on the body in the barrel, I think it's time that we now move on to the rest of the bodies found this past year. Because if you take some time to really survey what was found, it doesn't really paint a picture of a mafia dumping ground at Lake Mead, but rather a graveyard of tourists who spent their last vacation at a national park.
Oh no, it's one of those
The
things.
holiday weekend comes to a close. So does a deadly summer season at Lake Mead. Contact 13 investigative reporter Joe Bartels spent today at America's deadliest national park and saw firsthand why it can be so dangerous.
Lake Mead is a hot spot this Labor Day. As many as 150,000 people visited the lake just this week. But
Yellowstone isn't the most dangerous? I was expecting Yellowstone being the most deadly.
unfortunately,
Because, you know, the
is living up to its
The geyser of hot acidic
The
fluid.
holiday on Lake Mead marred by tragedy. Investigators say a man was dragged under a houseboat during a thunderstorm Saturday. His death sharing a common theme with
You
all
can't get
of the
close to
drownings
this.
at the park
Oh,
this
okay.
year.
This year there have been 11 fatalities related to drowning, and in each of those situations, none of the victims were wearing a life jacket.
Guys.
Yes, you heard that correctly. Lake Mead is technically the deadliest national park in America due to the sheer number of drownings. In a variety of cases, the bodies are not recovered due to the depth or lack of visibility in the area.
Guys, wear a
Out of
life
6 discoveries made
jacket.
This past year, only one has showed any signs of foul play, pointing to the rest of the discoveries likely being accidents or drowning victims. To date, only one of the bodies has been positively identified, discovery number 2, which ended up being the body of a 42-year-old man named Thomas Erndt, who drowned while on vacation with his 2 children.
That's a mustache.
His body had been sitting down there for nearly 20 years, and unfortunately, his case is just one of many.
What did we learn
As in
today?
variety of
Life
other cases
jackets.
involving
Yeah, wear life
search and
jackets.
rescue efforts
You know,
simply fail to
they're there
locate
for a
deceased
reason.
and
They're
eventually
important.
stop searching. To quote one
As someone who used to be a sailor, or at least did sailing, wear a life jacket.
article from The Guardian, unless there's a suspicion of wrongdoing, most local authorities will only spend a week or 2 searching for a drowning victim. Then it's up to the family of the missing person or volunteers. Some families spend thousands of dollars a day on commercial diving services. Others drag the bottom of the lake with grappling hooks. Sometimes they chance upon the victim. Often they work until their resources and spirits are spent. And to quote one article from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, Jeff Burbank is a former reporter for the LVRJ. In 1994, he researched for the newspaper how many people have gone missing at the recreation area. He found that since the National Park Service began keeping records in 1937 until 1994, some 59 people were listed as missing or presumed drowned in the recreation area. Furthermore, he would continue, many of the missing were boaters whose vessels were sunk by winds and waves. Some went under while fishing or swimming. One of the missing was a parachutist. One took their own life, one died in a plane crash, one was swept away by a flash flood. All had one thing in common. Their bodies were never recovered despite being in the lake, in most cases for decades. Now, obviously, this data doesn't factor in for all of the other drownings that would occur post-1994, nor would it account for anybody who ended up in the lake without any kind of documentation or not telling anybody where they went that day. Thomas Erndt, for example, passed away in 2002, which would land him outside that original list of 59. And additionally, it's also worth mentioning that another individual, Kenneth Funk, drowned in 2004 while trying to save his wife.
Kenneth Funk.
His body is still unaccounted for. There's been some speculation from the family that discovery number 3, the lone torso that was found there, was in fact him, as they believe it matched the general build and location. But as it stands today, there's been no confirmation.
Oh, it's just a
Additionally,
torso?
authorities have
Dang.
hinted at discovery number 4, the partial set of remains, to be a part of number 3. But once again, this is not confirmed either. And in regards to discoveries 5 and 6, there's been very little details shared thus far. But obviously this is an ongoing saga, and I will try to make it a point to keep you guys updated. But with you now caught up to speed with what has happened this past year, I'll go ahead and say that I don't think it's unreasonable to surmise that at least a few of the Mafia's problems are probably at the bottom of Lake Mead. Given the close proximity and that city's rich history, it's a very high likelihood. But as it stands today, there's been a lot of eyes on this story, and all we can really do today is speculate. What I do really enjoy about a topic like this is that it kind of opens up a lot of discussion for other things, like what do you think we'll find in the near future? What disappearances come to mind from this era? I'd love to know what you guys think about all of this, but before we end today's video, I'd like to give perhaps my favorite candidate for the body in the barrel. Obviously this is speculative, but I think it's an interesting story. That being the disappearance of Johnny Pappas. This man was the former manager of the Echo Bay Resort.
Everybody
This was a
from
project that
like the
was funded
80s
by
had
the
such
Teamsters
old
Pension,
names.
headed by the
Weird
Marquis
names.
Corporation.
Papas.
This was a hotel, notably on Lake Mead. But today, the hotel sits as a reminder of what can happen when the shoreline recedes, as the launch ramp into the lake now leads into the dirt.
Oh wow. Oh snap! There's nothing there.
This
Oh, it's like
location
dried
closed
up.
down in 2010.
That
At the
sucks.
time of Johnny Pappas, it was a thriving resort. On August 18th, 1976, at the age of 54, Johnny Pappas was looking to sell his boat that he owned on Lake Mead. He told his wife he was going to meet a man interested in purchasing this boat at a local restaurant on Las Vegas Boulevard.
Hey, weird off-topic question. Do you guys know about the Mystery Flesh Pit National Park?
After going to meet this person,
Because I feel like we should watch a
reporters
video
later
about the
found
Mystery
a
Flesh
lot
Pit
of
National
circus
Park.
with not a trace of him.
It's a very good national park.
In a typical mafia fashion, local authorities were quick to downplay the situation, stating that they had no reason to believe John.
Now I want to
Pappas'
show you guys the thing
disappearance
about
had
Flesh
anything
Pit
to do
National
with
Park.
foul
I think
play.
it's my favorite thing ever.
As one news report would state, because of his various associations, including those with underworld figures, police at first thought he may have been murdered. And in a rather jarring article, it seems the reason they came to this conclusion that he was A-OK still was because allegedly some witnesses saw him at a local gas station 2 days after he disappeared. As longtime local Las Vegas journalist John L. Smith had put it, the local newspapers published articles sketching the sparse available facts. Johnny's mob connections were barely mentioned. A week after he disappeared, a local police sergeant lamely said that there was nothing to indicate Pappas was dead, and the story began to fade. By the next month, police were at least letting on that they weren't expecting to find him alive. While Pappas was obviously never heard from again, the reason many people point to him being the body in the barrel is the fact that he was on his way to sell his boat. While obviously this is a long shot, at the end of the day, the only thing I know for certain is that everybody will be keeping an eye out to see what secrets might be revealed at Lake Mead. This is Barely Sociable. Have a good night.
Neat but spooky. Okay, no, seriously, do you guys know about Mystery Flesh Pit National Park? Because I'm gonna post. We're gonna watch it. We're gonna watch the video. It's a very good piece of fiction, and honestly, I want more people to like see it. Anyway, okay. We're gonna watch it. This is about a national park, but it's fake. Well, yeah.
If an underground organism of unfathomable size were unearthed in the United States, you might expect widespread panic at the horrifying discovery, or expect the US government to block off the cosmic terror from civilians. You might not expect the entity to be turned into a theme park marketed towards all ages. But that's what happened with the thankfully fictional Mystery Flesh Pit National Park. The name given to a creature of indeterminate size and origin that was nonetheless turned into a tourist attraction.
Hell yeah.
Mystery Flesh Pit is an ongoing multimedia
SCP-6
narrative
sound.
project by creator Trevor Roberts, who you can follow and support in the links below. The story of the pit is told through flyers,
The pit.
advertisements, and posters that rebrand the horrifying life form as a relaxing family getaway. And it's this upbeat language around something so blatantly terrifying that makes the Mystery Flesh Pit project so amusing and so unsettling. Just the sort of thing to cover at this spooky time of year. But since venturing into the darkness of an unknown organism is a little frightening to do on one's own,
Bronchial-
Edge will be joining me for this entry.
It's very
Great content
it's
about
very good,
prehistoric
guys.
life, unique
It's so
modern
good.
animals and bizarre cryptids, so he's just the person to help investigate this mysterious organism. Now let's begin our descent.
Unearthed accidentally in the early 1970s, the Mystery Flesh Pit, also known as the Permian Basin superorganism, is located in West Texas. Discovered by oil
Texas.
workers, the first tours of the pit were given by James Jackson, a small-time oil man and showman. The Mystery Flesh Pit was then further studied and reinforced by Anodyne Inc., a deep mining
Also known as
corporation
West
who opened the
Tex,
park
yeah.
as a tourist attraction in 1976, with assurances it was perfectly safe. We know how corporations are.
okay.
In selling the park to the public, Anodyne downplayed the horrifying nature of the pit itself, creating a friendly cartoon mascot, Caver Coop, who assured families the pit was nothing to be afraid of. The attraction
I
was
love that
later
it's set
absorbed into
just-
the national park system in the early 1980s.
I love that no one's like disturbed by the word flesh pit in this.
Which
It's
led
such
to
a
the
fun
Permian
thing.
Basin superorganism becoming further normalized. Surprising
Normalization.
absolutely no one, thousands of tourists regularly exploring the inside of an unknown organism would eventually prove to be a bad idea, as the
Yeah.
infamous 2007 disaster would prove. But that's a story we'll get to later.
For now, let's try to piece together the material the author has given us to try and understand the pit's biology. Like so many aspects of the pit, the more visceral reality of the organism was glossed over with clinical language by the professionals who first studied it. Since an organism of this size defied conventional science, numerous new disciplines were founded to help understand it.
There's so many weird
Geobiology
things.
is the term used for how the organism interacts with its environment. Looking at this early map, you can see the life form possesses muscular, skeletal, nervous, limbic, and vascular systems similar to traditional life, at least on the top layers. This cross-section of the pit, however, might just be a small fragment of a larger, more complex organism.
Big.
How large? Data collected from a series of boreholes shown in this diagram suggests that in some places the organism extends over 30 kilometers below the Earth's surface.
Very
For
big.
reference, the Marianas Trench is only 11 kilometers deep. Indeed,
It's just the
author
entirety
suggests
of
that the pit
Texas.
may well extend into the Earth's mantle, with some of the imaginary scientists implying that the organism may be native to the interior of the planet, having merely surfaced to the upper tectonic plates for unknown reasons. And despite public assurances to the contrary, there's evidence that people working behind the scenes long understood the superorganism to be dangerous. At one point in this fictional alternate history, the
Who
US
would've
government launched an investigation into the feasibility of using nuclear weapons to kill the life form. Although only the cover of this report was ever photographed, the conclusion seemed to be a resounding no. What made the Permian Basin superorganism so potentially catastrophic?
Because it's
The
so
answers
damn
lie
huge.
deeper within.
It's
In
so
the early
big.
days of the pit, a mission called Project Freefall was planned to chart the organism to a greater depth than ever before. A joint effort between the US government and Russian scientists, the expedition involved a 6-person team lowered into the pit via specialized vehicle. Over a period of 2 weeks, the pod descended down the dark, wet, scooshy pit, reaching regions that had never been explored before. At last, the probe drilled through a dense layer of
I guess so,
lower
yeah.
cartilage and entered an unknown region of blue tissue. A single person
Unknown?
was lowered into this opening. The Russian pilot described a reflective and prismatic environment of which we only have a single image from this onboard computer.
What the hell?
When the pod was raised back to the surface, it was heavily damaged, and the pilot was missing. The researchers concluded an attack from an unknown organism was the likely cause. Project Freefall makes it clear that the organic section of the mystery flesh pit is merely a portion of the life form, and other regions are unlike anything in the natural world. It also made it clear people aren't alone in the pit.
Even above the deeper layers, which weren't available to the public, hostile wildlife was frequently encountered. Large crustacean-like organisms were spotted as early as the first explorations, which this early sketch shows. In typical mystery flesh pit fashion, however, the corporate higher-ups turned these terrifying life forms into part of the marketing.
Explore
Wildlife
inner
safety brochures
space.
were handed out to visitors, explaining the exciting anatomical fauna that dwelled in the pit, and how to avoid getting eaten. At the foundation of the pit's ecosystem, playing a role similar to bacteria in the bodies of regular-sized animals, were macrobacteria. Unlike regular bacteria you can only spot under a microscope, macrobacteria were multicellular Goliaths that could reach lengths of 12 feet or 4 meters across.
Big boys.
This educational chart produced by the Park Services showcases the various types of macrobacteria and the other bizarre species that dwell in this imaginary Permian Basin superorganism. We won't be able to cover them all, but one
Abyssal
notable species
copepod.
is the mesogaleal tridecapod, an insect-like organism that gets its name from its 13 legs. As this faded, wild about nature infographic will tell you. These pseudovertebrates are almost the size of humans and aren't technically vampires, as this guide will assure you, although they do feed off the pit and look like something out of my nightmares. In other areas of the pit, there were sightings of other more dangerous species, and even rumors of human-like life forms called merrowfolk, which Anodyne Inc. strongly denied. They maintained the mystery flesh pit was just like any other national park, and anyone who mysteriously vanished just didn't read their brochure carefully enough.
With the Permian Basin superorganism so hostile to human life, excavating it was a challenge. A challenge that began with finding people to staff it. As this oddly hilarious park ranger recruitment bulletin suggests, however, with the right benefits and incentives, Anodyne Inc. was in fact able to find people willing to enlist in the Mystery Flesh Pit Park Ranger program. What kinds of jobs did this entail? Well, why not become a park trail engineer?
This looks cool.
Anxiety-inducing position involved using compact stent frames and other highly specialized tools to create new pathways within the pit. To be a park trail engineer required extensive knowledge of caving, geology, and macrobiology, as attacks from local wildlife were apparently common.
I love that he has like a
personal
gun.
protection, the laser scope, anatomical environmental multi-tool, was the most reliable defense. Intended to blast new paths within the mystery flesh pit, this portable tool, an example of which is on display here, was frequently used to ward off aggressive life forms.
Laser guns.
To more safely traverse the pit's interior, Anodyne Inc. developed the Internal Anatomy Vehicle, or IAV, a vehicle that could traverse the slickest and steepest of routes. Its maneuverability came in part from a rotating mechanical joint that connected the front of the vehicle to the midsection.
UAC. These are very cool devices, though.
Ventarial Environment Excursion Vehicle was developed.
Ambulator.
From schematics used
Intra-pit safari.
the set of twin counter-oriented screws for propulsion. These safari vessels could seat up to 8 park guests and take them deep into the pits with supposed safety.
It's like a tour.
Being the key word here, as a mock-up of an incident report tells us that vehicles were bent, melted, crushed, dented, or dissolved at least on some occasions. Maybe traversing the unknown depths of a giant organism isn't a good idea after all.
Sounds great.
Well, as Caver Dave might say, that's not the right attitude for exploring the Funderground. For adventurous park guests, the opportunity of camping on natural, unreinforced trails was possible with the interventarial tent, shown here in this diagram. Unlike traditional tents, this collapsible, multi-sided device could endure the crushing shifts and deadly wildlife of the pit while campers slept, at least most of the time. When things went wrong, emergency trail phones were one way to reach the park staff. Called lighthouses by seasoned hikers, these subterranean telecommunication devices were highly advanced for the 1970s. And indeed, the study of the Permian Basin superorganism led to numerous technological breakthroughs.
One of many lucrative results from the development of the fictional pit were tremendous advances in the field of computer science.
Yay!
In the 1980s, Anodyne began to release computers made of nervous tissue taken from the Permian Basin superorganism. With 4 terabytes of organic tissue storage memory, these machines were extremely popular.
Nice.
An even more well-known product exported from the Mystery Flesh Pit was amniotic ballast, a miraculous fluid from deep within the pit, branded as Vita Salve in advertisements such as this one. The product could cure various illnesses and was almost certainly safe to use.
Almost certainly.
But the most notable service Anodyne offered was access to the Mystery Flesh Pit itself. Aside from hiking, tourists paid for access to the amniotic thermal springs. The springs had strong effects on visitors who bathed in them, including making their skin healthier and giving them a euphoric sensation, as long as they could take their mind off the fact they were bathing in an unknown liquid. The true focus of the pit for most visitors, however, was the lower visitor center, a gateway into the deep that took 8 years to construct, with restrooms, a gift shop, and even restaurants. The lower visitor center—
There's a Burger King!
—was the hub of the national park.
They got a Burger King.
Was it a good idea to suspend a several-ton building on steel cables in the middle of the pit? Anodyne Inc. soon found out.
At last, we've come to the 2007 disaster and all that follows. On July 4th, 2007, due to Anodyne's negligence, something as simple as heavy rain and a faulty water pump caused a section of the pit to flood to unsafe levels. The result was a catastrophe most had never imagined. The Permian Basin superorganism began to wake up. Imagine waking up from a long nap to find hundreds of tiny bugs had built a miniature hotel in your throat. You'd be pretty mad.
Yeah.
At 9:52 p.m., the lifeform began a choking response due to the flooding, causing the entire lower visitor center to be crushed and swallowed deeper into its gullet. But this was just the beginning. According to an incident report, the creature then started to surface, with people living all around West Texas witnessing limbs of the superorganism rising from the ground, the scale of which is captured in this impressionistic painting from a survivor. And then, the creature returned to its slumber, likely lulled back to sleep by a mysterious contingency measure redacted from the incident report. In the wake of the disaster, Anodyne Inc. was dissolved, and the park was finally closed to the public, with people perhaps finally realizing that hiking inside a giant creature isn't such a good idea after all. The author imagines that the region around the pit has now become a ghost town, but behind fences, some are still monitoring it. In the present of this alternate timeline, the Permian Basin superorganism is now kept under constant surveillance, but who knows when it might awaken once more. There's a lot more lurking in the pit you can read about online, and you can follow and support Trevor Roberts by using the links in the description below, or by purchasing something from the Mystery Flesh Pit gift shop. Yeah. And special thanks to Edge for helping me archive this mysterious organism.
Or thing is just plausible, or just normal
Edge.
animal that wants to
cover
take a
all
nap.
sorts of topics and natural history.
Yeah, dude wanted to take a nap, and people started building like tourist traps in his throat, and he's just like, no, dude. I love the story of Mystery Flesh Pit National Park. It's so fun. That That's a weird way to put it, but like, you get some really it's a really interesting alternate timeline. It's so neat. Okay, that was enough tangents. Okay, next video. Hey, can't see. Next video I think is labeled, oh, it's Public Domain Day. Yeah, so January 1st, or a lot of stuff came into public domain, which is dope. So let's learn what was in it.
Happy New Year! And happy Public Domain Day! Yesterday. If you're watching this the day it goes up. If you're watching this later than that, happy, even more belated Public Domain Day. Before I get too far into this, I should say that what I'm about to tell you is based on U.S. copyright law. Naturally, every country has its own policies regarding copyright and when given works are considered to be in the public domain. I don't know about the copyright laws of other countries. I barely know about the copyright laws of my own country, but
they're all terrible, is all I remember.
I know enough. Namely, that works first published in the U.S. in the year 1927 are, as of January 1st, now in the public domain. That includes thousands and thousands of works, most of which you've never heard of and have no reason to care about, as is the case every year when a new batch of works enters the public domain. But as is also the case every year, there are a few works newly free of copyright that are noteworthy. For example, Upton Sinclair's novel Oil, which was partially and very loosely adapted in 2007 as the film There Will Be Blood, is now in the public domain.
Yay.
So if Paul Thomas Anderson ever decides to write a sequel, There Will Be More Blood, the title's right there. He can pull more inspiration from Oil without having to pay a dime in licensing fees to anyone. Or, if some other filmmaker is a big fan of the novel and has always resented the liberties Anderson took with it, now they can make their own adaptation of it for free. Well, free except for the costs associated with producing any feature film, but how much can it really be? Another
like $2?
Work of literature entering the public domain this year is The Big Four by Agatha Christie, the fifth book to feature Hercule Poirot. My friend and Ensign's Law co-star Dana Cole and I just started watching the ITV Poirot series starring David Suchet as part of our Trek Reluctantly watch-along live stream. But apart from that, and a few of the movies adapted from Christie's stories, I'm not all that familiar with Poirot. What I've seen so far I've liked, but I've never read any of the original books. I've always been more of a Sherlock Holmes guy. Speaking of which, also entering the public domain this year is the Case Book of Sherlock Holmes, which
Sherlock!
The final Holmes stories written by Arthur Conan Doyle to be published. That means that the entire original Holmes canon is now in the public domain in the United States. All 56 short stories and all 4 novels. So, if you thought
Yay!
there were a lot of Holmes
We know it's at least $2. Yeah, at least $2.
Look out!
We're getting all of them now.
Entering the public domain is actually kind of a big deal because for quite a few years, the good people at the Doyle estate have been trying to maintain a grip on their intellectual property rights relating to Holmes, and they've kind of been dicks about it. They've charged licensing fees for adaptations of Holmes stories that were already in the public domain, arguing that since some Holmes works were still copyrighted, Holmes himself and other associated characters were also still copyrighted.
Wow, what a
and
dick.
They've gone to court to try and obtain those fees when necessary. They haven't had much luck. The way U.S. copyright law is typically interpreted, characters appearing in public domain works are considered to be public domain themselves, even if they also appear in works that are still
intellectual property laws are a pain in the butt.
To use and adapt, so long as the adaptation
I'd say they're very not good.
Derived from the public domain works. But such a careful reading of the law is no longer necessary now that the entire Doyle canon is in the public domain. Doyle himself died in 1930, which means his heirs have had 93 years to profit from his work. In the U.S. anyway, the Holmes canon has been public domain in the U.K. since the year 2000.
Bullying to become
93
bullying
years
works.
to make
Bullying
money
companies
off of
works.
Something you had nothing to do with.
That's important, and people need to remember
To
that.
the person who created it is a pretty good run. More than fair, really. So I can't say I feel too bad for the Doyle estate. And plus, like I said, they're dicks.
Aw.
Let's now
Oh,
leave behind
hey,
the literary
they're
world.
dicks.
You're watching a YouTube video, so I assume you don't read anyway. And talk about
Hey.
some music that entered the public domain this year. These are the songs themselves, the music and the lyrics, not any particular recordings. My Blue Heaven, written by George Whiting and Walter Donaldson, is now in the public domain. Folks my age and younger are more likely to associate that phrase with the movie from 1990 starring Steve Martin, which is loosely based on the life of Henry Hill, who was also the inspiration for Goodfellas, which came out the same year. It has nothing to do with anything else in this video. I just think it's neat. Anyway, before it was the title of a Steve Martin movie or a completely different Taking Back Sunday song, it was a song published in 1927 and first and most famously recorded in 1928 by Gene Austin. When whippoorwill calls and evening is nigh, I hurry to my blue heaven. I turn to the right, a little white light.
I can sing too.
You to my blue heaven. Probably the most famous song that is now public domain is Puttin' on the Ritz by Irving.
Oh, hell yeah.
It's been covered a million times.
Yo, put on the Ritz.
Frankenstein, you all know it now. If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where fashion sits?
Putting on the Ritz.
Different types who wear a day coat, pants with stripes, and cutaway coat, perfect fits. Putting on the Ritz.
Yeah.
Dressed up like $1 million trooper, trying hard to look like Gary Cooper. Super duper, come let's mix where Rockefellers walk with sticks or umbrellas in their mitts. Putting on the Ritz. I'm no Fred Astaire, but I think you get the idea. And the best part, I can sing that whole song whenever I want, and I don't gotta pay Irving Berlin's great-grandkids a fucking dime.
Yeah.
Also entering the public domain this year, I Scream, You Scream, We All Scream for Ice Cream by Howard Johnson, Billy Maul, and Robert A. King. Yes, it's not just a thing people say sometimes. It's a whole-ass song. I had no idea.
Big Shrink Home.
And last song I'll mention, The Best Things in Life Are Free by George Gard De Silva, Lou Brown, and Ray Henderson. It's not very well known today. There are other, more recent songs with the same title, but given the subject matter of this video, it felt appropriate. The moon belongs to everyone. The best things in life are free. The stars belong to everyone. They gleam there for you and me.
It's okay because it's pronounced T-I-T-Z though. Wow. Okay.
That sing, the sunbeams that shine, they're yours, they're mine, and love can come to everyone. The best things in life are free.
Yay.
A few
Music.
days ago, my best buddy Jason called me and said, "You've been singing a lot in your videos recently, and I think you should really commit to it and do even more singing." Well, Jason, I just have one question. How are you feeling now, motherfucker? Movies! Oh, the movies that have just become public domain. Remember, works published in 1927 entered the public domain this year, and 1927 was a big year.
All right, what movies are public
How
domain?
big? Well, Wings, the first film ever to win the Best Picture Oscar. Public domain.
Huh.
The Lodger,
That's
directed
cool.
by Alfred Hitchcock, inspired by the Jack the Ripper case. Not the first film Hitchcock ever directed, but frequently considered to be the first Hitchcock movie, if you know what I'm saying. Public domain.
Neat.
October, 10 Days That Shook the World, directed by Sergei Eisenstein and Grigory Alexandrov, a dramatization of the overthrow of the provisional government during the 1917 Russian Revolution, which features Eisenstein continuing his boundary-pushing exploration of montage, public domain. And those are just for starters. Metropolis, directed by Fritz Lang, one of the greatest and most influential films ever made. Public domain. Sunrise, directed by F.W. Murnau, likewise one of the greatest films ever made.
Metropolis, if it
favorite
exists.
of mine, an absolute masterpiece. Public domain. The King of Kings, directed by Cecil B. DeMille, one of the first and still one of the most enduring cinematic depictions of the life of Jesus. The first film to ever premiere at Grauman's Chinese Theater. Public domain. College, starring Buster Keaton, directed by Keaton and James W. Horn. This one may have been in the public domain before now due to its copyright not being properly registered or renewed or something. I don't know. What I do know is, if it wasn't before, it's definitely in the public domain now. It belongs to the people. And that's pretty cool because I love Buster Keaton, and College is one of his best feature films with one of the most hilariously abrupt, dark endings I've ever seen. It is wall-to-wall brilliance, provided, of course, you can overlook the scene where Buster does blackface.
No.
Speaking of which, also now in the public domain, The Jazz Singer, starring Al Jolson, directed by Alan Crossland.
The first talkie.
And hey,
Yo,
congratulations, now you don't
talkies.
have to watch it because I just told you the only noteworthy thing about it. A technical
Talkies.
milestone, but artistically unremarkable, despite the knots some film scholars have tied themselves into over the years to argue otherwise. And also, did I mention the blackface? There are also 3 noteworthy lost films entering the public domain this year, none of which feature any actors performing in blackface. Although I guess we can't be sure. Casey at the Bat, directed by Monty Bryce, based on the famous poem by Ernest Thayer. Technically, this one isn't lost because there's supposedly a copy at the Library of Congress, but to my knowledge, it isn't commercially available in any form. But if you want to arrange a screening at the Library of Congress...
Wait, hold on. Is Metropolis found? I thought it was
I don't know, record it on your phone?
At least not.
I guess
Hold
you
on.
can do that now.
I'm going to find out.
You will have to actually go to the Library of Congress and not just green screen yourself into a picture of part of it. I've learned that the hard way. Apparently, I'm still at my house.
No, there's the full movie up on like YouTube.
Babe Comes Home.
Like all of
directed
it.
by Ted Wilde, another baseball movie. This one's starring Babe Ruth. We have other baseball movies starring Babe Ruth, including Headin' Home from 1920, where Babe plays himself in an almost entirely fictionalized...
Yeah, I've never heard about Metropolis being lost.
But it's still a shame that Babe
I've
Comes
seen
Home is lost because, come
the
on,
original
a
is
baseball movie starring
Really? Huh.
Babe Ruth, released in 1927, the same year Babe Ruth hit 60 home runs. Are you saying you wouldn't want to watch that? You fucking commie?
What we see is the... What do you mean that's a truncated version? It's like 2 hours and 30 minutes.
Imagining someone trying to make
Is
sense
it
of the mixed
longer?
signals I'm sending here because a few minutes ago I was full
Oh,
of
no.
praise for the Eisenstein movie about the October Revolution, and now I'm like, you'd better love Babe Ruth, you commies. I am large. I contain multitudes. Walt Whitman, loved by many commies, not a commie. Public domain, though. London After Midnight, directed by Todd Browning, starring Lon Chaney, one of the most famous of all lost films. Seriously, if they had known back in 1927 how much we'd all want to see it today, maybe they would have set aside a few extra prints so that the one destroyed in the 1965 MGM Vault fire wouldn't have been it. So, if you do happen to find a copy,
95%.
domain now,
Oh,
so you can make
neat.
copies of your copy and get rich by becoming the sole distributor of one of the most sought-after lost films in the history of cinema. I know that's my business plan if I find a print of it. Set reminder, look for copy of London After Midnight in basement and in attic and behind refrigerator. Never hurts to be thorough. Anyway, those are all the works I wanted to talk about that have entered the public domain this year. Next year's additions to the public domain are going to be an even bigger deal, and not just for the importance of the works themselves. For the very long and very bumpy road one of those works in particular has taken to reach the public domain. If you think the Doyle estate have been assholes when it comes to trying to hold on to their copyrights, wait until you hear about these guys.
Yo. Oh, wait. Shit. Isn't Mickey Mouse going in the public domain in, like, a year? It's Mickey Mouse, right? I swore I remember something about Mickey Mouse being, like, becoming public domain. Hold on. Yeah! Yeah! Steamboat Willie is gonna enter the public domain in 2024! Let's go! Oh, let's go! Oh, Winnie the Pooh's already public domain. Oh, it's this. Oh yeah, this one's gonna be weird because it's like Steamboat Willie, old Mickey Mouse is public domain, like Beast Boy, but not modern iterations. Apparently, I don't know the details, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't really say. But it's gonna be really funny when it's January 1st, 2024, and we can make dumb jokes about Mickey Mouse being public domain. That's going to be my favorite thing. I can't wait. The countdown starts now. Anyway, so this one is interesting because this was submitted by, I believe, Brandon submitted it. Thank you, Brandon. It was about SATA Express, which is a thing I've never used but seen a lot on computer parts that I have. So I'm kind of curious.
You had a X99 or maybe an H or Z97 motherboard, you probably came across your usual assortment of ports. But most of these motherboards also have...
Actually, wait, hold the hell up. What do you mean you... Hold up.
Usual assortment of...
What do you mean unusual assortment of ports? You have three Ethernet jacks on a motherboard. What the fuck? Where did this come from? This has 8 slots of RAM. What is this? What is this? Yeah, this has 8 slots of RAM. What is this motherboard? Bro.
So these motherboards...
Oh, it's a server board. Okay.
One of these.
Very common server board.
Which is
okay, consider me stupid then.
I don't really see anywhere other than these...
Ooh, M.2 slot over there.
But I couldn't find any actual images of a board
PCI?
with these.
I don't know.
This is SATA Express. This was a actually kind of clever way of using existing connectors and keeping it backwards compatible. You see, this connector is made up of 2 SATA connectors. So you can actually just plug in regular SATA drives to 2 of these ports, and they work just like normal 6 gigabit SATA ports. However, it does have this extra little connector here, and when you find a SATA Express device or cable, this will then output PCI Express. Now, the funny thing is that this was included on a whole bunch of boards. I've personally owned a couple boards with it, and this is pulled from a server that I just recently did a video on, although I probably won't have edited it by the time I release this video, just because this video is going to be so much shorter, and it takes me forever to do long videos. This connector appeared on one generation, and then just disappeared. It's one of the few recent connectors that I can think of, or interfaces that I can think of, that just died. There are some short-lived connectors, but I can't think of any that just died. Like, they're on boards and they exist, but they're missing the other half. Because finding any SATA Express connector cables or devices or anything like that that actually hit the market is like impossible. I mean, one, it's kind of hard to Google for because It keeps wanting to change it to like PCI Express or external SATA. It's kind of hard to track down things, and everything's.
Oh wait, yeah, okay.
everything's
External
like
SATA is
at
different than this.
CES
Okay.
Or whatever. They said they're gonna release this, and they said they're gonna release that, but none of these things actually came out. Finding anything that actually uses this connector is like impossible. I searched high and low, and I think I've found basically the only commercially available device that actually existed for it. Before
What
I get
is
into
it? What
the
is
device
it?
that I found,
What
this is what the
is it?
cable looks like. As you can
Oh
see,
God.
2 standard SATA ports, and then this additional one that's carrying these additional wires to the device, and this obviously signals it to switch into PCI Express mode. These cables look and feel just like regular SATA cables. I think they're basically the same thing. This is one of the few, and it actually says SATA Express.
Where does it
They do have
go?
an example of the other end. Now, the one at the bottom is your standard connector used for U.2 or SAS drives. If it's U.2, carries PCI Express, and if it's SAS drive, it's just the SAS protocol.
Oh, okay, this is
kind of regular hard
this is
drives.
beyond me
You
at
see
this
the
point.
top one has a little notch right here, and that basically means that you can't connect a regular U.2 device to it. I don't know.
Yeah, like I remember having them,
This. People said, "Oh, Intel,"
but I never used it.
Blah blah blah. As far as I can tell, none of them came out. They just don't exist. Also, as far as I can tell, this never appeared in any servers, which is probably why none of the drives existed. This came out at the same time that M.2 came out, and M.2 obviously just completely took over, and that's what we all use. U.2 came out to handle a server space.
U.2 is
systems for NVMe.
Huh.
Now, I don't believe this actually supports NVMe. I think it still uses the old HCI interface. U.2 is NVMe all the time, as far as I know. Funnily enough, this cable does actually terminate into a SATA Express. You can plug in a U.2 drive to this, and it gets power from a little SATA power connector. It doesn't work, though. I have tried this. The Amazon page that I bought this from, which was it was like $20 or something for this useless cable. Like, what am I supposed to plug into this? The Amazon page did say that this does not support U.2, even though it's the right connector, which means unfortunately we can't actually plug any regular drives into this. This only supports, I believe it's just 2 lanes of PCI Express 2.0 and maybe 3.0. Doesn't even meet the requirements of a normal NVMe or U.2 drive that has the 4 lanes. That being said, the cable does exist, and it's useless. However, this cable that I was showing off, which has the proper
useless cable,
quote-unquote SATA Express connector, this one actually belongs to a product, and it does the same thing. It pulls power from a SATA power cable. And
show product.
Cable, you can use this.
That's it. What?
This is an ASRock front USB 3.1 panel, which takes the SATA Express cable and it turns it in to a standard USB 3 Type A connector and a Type C connector.
That's it?
And it takes up an entire drive bay to do this.
It takes up...
I don't know why this exists, but ASRock for some
not
reason
even
made it, and it was
not
the
even
only device that
well, of course it's not even Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt's
uses
Intel.
SATA Express.
But also,
for some reason,
I love it's just
the cable that came
one single USB-C
connector.
Like, oh yeah.
But this connector here is
it's for power.
Just insane.
It's labeled for power.
I don't know what they're thinking on this. This
yeah, like why even bother? Like what?
This connector on the other end, which is a USB 2.0 header that simply has power connections. In order to use this, it ties up your entire SATA Express slot. Okay, fine, that's to be expected. And it also takes out one of your USB 2 headers on the motherboard just to get power.
Why? It's getting power from
it. Like a Y splitter or something so that you could still use that. Why is there power coming from this then? I mean, it's getting 12 and 5 volt from it.
What?
So why does it need extra 5 volt from this? It's so weird. Maybe this cable's not the standard cable. If I recall, the guy said this was missing the box. Pulling power from USB 2.0 header for seemingly no reason, and it's taking up that header, which back then, you know, you're
not even like
most things.
It's USB 3.1, and I'm like,
I don't know how many people bought one of these. All that's on it is a USB USB-C controller, or USB 3.1 controller, I should say,
That's
and
it.
some power stuff, and like the little chip that handles USB Type-C.
This is the worst expansion board I've ever seen, or expansion drive bay thing I've ever seen.
Again, why does this exist? How many of these did they sell? For anyone who still uses an old X79 or X99 motherboard with one of these connectors, because it's the only thing you can plug into it, basically. I have seen like a breakout board that uses the cable to like break it out to another board and basically give you a PCI Express slot, which would be marginally useful. That being said, I think it was just a prototype and it never actually went anywhere. I don't really have
Thank God.
to say on this.
Like,
it was really just a challenge to try and find.
It's so lame.
Yes, the one device that was made is completely pointless. I'll probably put this back up on eBay just to get rid of it. You're welcome to try and track it down, because I don't know who needs one of these, and they were only on the one generation of board. I'll probably even include this useless cable to plug into nothing.
It's all wasted. These are some of the I don't think were released. Okay, what are the things that didn't get released? M.2 SATA enclosure. Okay, that's fair. Dual M SATA enclosure. Okay. PCIe breakout board prototype. Come on! You're telling me we could have gotten a breakout board for PCI? Come on! This sucks! Boo! It could have been so much better. What happened? Okay. Gonna give the warning now. The next video involves spooters, so if you don't like spooters, turn away for like 20 minutes. Thank you. Spooter involvement in 3, 2, 1.
Oh, well, hello, look at you. Oh, aren't you a deadly little hunter? So fuzzy, so cute. No, zoom in, you fools. That's better. Oh, look at those eyes. Oh,
Cutie.
Who's a cute little spider? That's right, you are.
Cute.
Hey, smart people. Joe here. Behold, my children. I mean, my pets. I used to hate spiders, okay? But jumping spiders, these are the ones that made me change my mind. Like, I legitimately love spiders now. It's because of these guys. And it's the eyes. That's what did it for me. They're so curious. They look up at you.
Aww.
They follow you. They're genuinely so stinking cute. But beyond their cuteness, jumping spiders possess one of the most advanced and highly tuned visual systems in the animal kingdom. I remember a few years ago, I read an article that said jumping spiders might be able to see the moon in detail. I was like, are you kidding me?
Huh.
Nothing else that's this small can see anywhere near that kind of resolution. So how do they do it? I made this video to find the answer to that question.
Optics?
We're gonna get up close and personal with these guys so that we can see some of the really cool things that they can do.
Little
and
spiders.
how their one-of-a-kind visual system makes that
Little
possible.
guys.
And I visited a lab to see how real scientists study these things.
Cute little guys.
Okay, but first things first.
Like Tachikoma? Hell yeah.
Spiders come in a lot of shapes and forms, but about
Spooter.
1 in 8 known spider species is a jumping spider.
Look at him!
Them, the biggest family of spiders on Earth. There are more jumping spider species than species of mammals. They're officially known as salticidae, or salticids. That comes from the Latin word to jump. And jumpers come in a lot of shapes and sizes too. Unless you live in Antarctica, there's probably a jumping spider near you right now. You should be honored.
So this is kind of a weird thing to study.
Usually when I tell people that I study spiders, I get sort of a very shocked reaction. First, people didn't even really know that there are people that do spend a lot of their time watching.
Wait, this is in UMass Amherst? Oh no, I live near this facility.
Spiders because of their long
I live near the spider
I'm
facility.
really intrigued and ask questions and, what do they see?
As in the same state, at least. I live in the same state as the spider.
What's your day like? What's your environment like? What do you do?
So the sensory sort of world of a jumping spider is very different than ours. So a jumping spider detects a lot of cues in its environment through vibrations. They're
look
also
at 'em.
tasting things with their feet. Their visual world is also very different because us and many other vertebrates, we have 2 eyes that look around our world, but their eyes are set up very, very differently.
Okay, most spiders have 8 eyes. It's like the second thing you learn after spiders have 8 legs. But most types of spiders don't actually rely on vision as their #1 sense. They detect vibrations in their surroundings using tiny hairs, or they smell chemicals in their environment. But vision is #1 for jumping spiders. It's what makes them such deadly hunters. And we're about to put that to the test.
So they do a bunch of vibe checks?
Circle of life, guys.
The idea is that this spider
Oh
is
no,
going to
poor
eat this
dude.
cricket, and we're gonna get the pounce in slow motion.
Aw, poor
All you
dude.
gotta do, okay, is just go eat that, okay? Go eat that.
Imagine recording this in.
It's right there in front of you.
Look
Just
at
take it.
look at the filming setup for this little guy.
Please jump. Oh, I hate you so much. Please back up. Oh my god. Oh my god. Go.
He did it.
Yes! 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 Yes!
There's so much lighting setup for
That took
spider and a
that took
cricket.
like a whole day. When your hunting strategy involves
It's cute.
flinging yourself at your prey, you need eyes with really good depth perception, sensitivity, and detail. Now, just like a camera, there's usually a trade-off. More sensitivity typically means less detail, and vice versa.
Basically, the more light that a single cell or single photoreceptor can take in, it reduces the resolution. So if you sort of think of it like a TV screen with the number of pixels you have, if you have really large pixels, each individual
one of my
one could be
spiders
bright,
got
but less pixels make up the whole image. There's constantly a trade-off between how many photons you can take in versus how small details you can resolve in your environment.
If you want more sensitivity, you can make bigger sensory cells to sample a lot of light, but then you can't fit as many in your eye, so you lose detail. If you want more detail, you make your sensors smaller, so you have more of them, but then they're less sensitive. Different animals have evolved different kinds of eyes to solve this trade-off. Insects, obviously, have very tiny peepers, but they solve the detail problem using compound eyes. Every facet on a compound eye acts kind of like its own eyeball. So the more they pack in their head, the more detail. Each one only samples a super tiny area, but they add up to give a kind of mosaic view of the world. Dragonflies have pretty much the best compound eyes out there, with around 30,000 of those little units per eye.
Wow.
To get that level of detail, though, their head is like all eyes.
Resolution.
They've run out of eye real estate. That's their limit. For a compound eye to see as much detail as the human eye can, it'd have to be the size of a basketball, which would make it pretty hard to fly. Humans and other animals went for a totally different solution. Round eyes with a lens up front that focuses light on a big layer of cells at the back. Packing lots of those cells back there means a crisp,
all eyes.
detailed picture. We've got hundreds of millions of those light sensing cells in our eyes, and some birds of prey have like 10 times more than we do. Things with backbones and skulls can support huge eyes, but jumping spiders are not huge. Most of them can fit on like a pencil.
Oh,
eraser.
hi,
You
he's
can't
waving.
Fit big eyes or millions of light sensing cells in this guy. Yet when it comes to detail and sensitivity, they have the best eyes of anything without a backbone on land. But they don't have compound eyes, and they don't have eyes like humans. So the big question is, how do they do it? It all starts with those two big, adorable eyes up front. They're not actually round. They're tubes, kind of like telescopes. Lens on the front to focus light onto a retina in the back.
The front two
Is
eyes
it like
are
a
the principal eyes.
huge ton
Jumping
of like
spiders, although their eyes
lenses?
are big relative to their body size, they're still very, very, very small.
To get high detail out of those tiny eyes, these guys have a really cool trick up their 8 sleeves. They can move those telescope eyes inside their
Oh,
heads.
what the?
Each eye tube has its own set of muscles, and what they can do is they can independently move each of them.
Jumping spider eyes are only big enough to fit a few hundred light-sensing cells, but as each little telescope eye moves, it samples little bits of the larger image, almost like shining a flashlight at different parts of a picture until you can make out the whole thing. So they get amazing vision in a fraction of the space that a round eye would require. Telescopes for eyes! Are you kidding me? But that telescope scanning trick is only part of the story. Wonder if these guys would chase a laser pointer like a cat does. There's only one way to find out. Oh, what do you see? See this over here?
Oh.
What's this? Oh,
Yo!
over here. Over here.
How's he doing that from behind?
What's this? Now, most jumping spiders only have 2 types of color sensing cells in their big old cute main eyes.
That was great.
Cells
That was good
sensitive to
content.
green light and cells sensitive mainly to ultraviolet light. But weird physics happens to light when you're at really small scales. And jumping spider eyes are actually built to correct
This is very cute.
See, different wavelengths or colors of light, they get bent by a lens at slightly different angles. It leads into what's known as chromatic aberration. Now, this is not that.
It's that really shitty thing that they put in modern video games that has the color distortion. That's chromatic aberration. Turn it off. It's cool for cinematic effects, but it's not realistic.
Big of a deal in a big eye like yours, but in an itsy bitsy
I think it looks cool, but also
colors of light are coming into
bleh.
focus at totally different distances from the lens.
And when you look inside the jumping spider retina, you'll find photoreceptors that are more sensitive to UV or ultraviolet wavelengths closer, and then deeper or potentially longer wavelength. Photoreceptors that are sensitive to certain colors are actually at different depths, so all colors can be in focus at the same time.
Like, that's ridiculously cool. They can even use those stacked cells to see how out of focus different parts of an image are in different layers. And they can use that to calculate depth perception. We need 2 eyes to get
with 1 eye.
But jumping spiders
Yo.
distance with just 1 eye. Did you see what happened when I shined that laser pointer behind the
That's
spider?
so cool.
It always turns to point its 2 big telescope eyes at whatever is interesting. And that is what those other 6 eyes are for. These other eyes are a jumping spider's motion detection system.
The motion detecting eyes, called secondary eyes, they have a nearly 360-degree view around the hemisphere.
Not really used.
Secondary eyes are much more simple than the spider's 2 telescope eyes. They don't see color, they're super low resolution, but they are great at sensing motion.
So you can't sneak up on a jumping spider.
It just automatically is like, motion, turn body.
Turn body.
Wow.
Whenever those 6 other eyes detect motion, the spider instinctually turns its big eyes to face it and get a more detailed picture. As soon as I learned about this, something really big just clicked in my brain. Because these 8 tiny spider eyes do the same thing that we do with 2 eyes. We use the center of the light sensing part of our eye to make out detail and color. On the other hand, most of our peripheral vision is really low detail, but really sensitive to motion. Jumping spider eyes do the same thing. Those telescope eyes make out detail and color, and all those secondary eyes, well, they sense motion without much detail. They've divided all that work up into 8 parts instead of 2, like us. All 8 eyes combined, jumping spider eyes see better than dragonflies, as good as pigeons, and actually about 1/5 as good as us. All with peepers that are no bigger than a pinhead. But how do we know any of this anyway? I mean, it's not like you can give a spider an eye test. Well, actually, yes, you can.
Show me where you keep your babies. This is like the Ritz of Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, show
You
them
didn't tell
anything
me
we want.
spiders are just watching TV all the time in here. Can we go see it? I want to give a spider an eye exam.
Yeah, let's do it.
To get a spider ready for their eye
Spider
exam,
TV.
Alex applies some melted wax and mounts a little stick hat, which he'll remove later.
I can't
Next, the
stop
spider
being
holds
amazed by
onto a
this.
little ball. Alex can track the ball's motion to measure how the spider turns and moves while looking into the eye tracking microscope.
What we have here is a special camera that allows us to pick up light that's reflected off the retinas. So what we're left with is what the spider is viewing and where they are actually looking.
Whoa.
Like looks in my eye.
Spider POV.
Eye exam. You're doing the same thing here.
Yeah, exactly. And as the spider gets fatigued or less interested, you see this exploratory movement where it's looking around.
So it's just getting bored.
It's getting bored, but when the cube moves again, the spider gets interested and tracks
And they're
it.
doing this all by moving their eyes inside their head.
Inside their head, yep.
And so sometimes I even see like the eyes seem to almost point in different directions for a minute. Like they come apart there and then they're back together.
If they're really interested in something, like a cube moving in front of them, they bring the retinas together to get a better view of it.
We should give them something really interesting to look at, like some YouTube videos.
Yeah, definitely.
We couldn't think of anything better to watch than our good friends from Deep Look. Let's see if spiders like Deep Look.
Yeah, let's check it out.
Okay, so the fly's moving and the retinas look right at it. Must be hungry.
Oh yeah.
This might be the
Oh, you can
first
kind of
time
see
a
it in there. That's
ever
cool.
watched a YouTube video, except for the one that's right behind you right now. Getting up close and personal with my spider
Like spiders.
friends It's really made me
Spiders, it's not spiders hack physics. Spiders abuse the physics engine.
The world is so small, but these tiny feats of biology and physics have allowed them to interact with that world.
Their build lets them abuse the physics engine. That's why it's so cool.
Even with each other in some super interesting ways.
Maybe if you were thinking about sort of a classical representation of a spider, you imagine a large web and insects flying in and getting trapped and the spider running over and detecting the vibrations in their web. But jumping spiders are a lot more like cat-like predators. So they walk around, they stalk prey, they pounce on it.
Their visual system also comes in handy during mating displays, which are pretty impressive. When a male spider approaches a female,
Oh, I remember this part. Look at them dance. Look at them go.
Or getting lucky. So many jumping spiders perform elaborate dances as a way to attract female attention from a safe distance. Researchers have used the spider eye tracking machine to see where females look during these dances and which parts they find most attractive. In mammal eyes and jumping spider eyes, nature has solved the same problem using totally different hardware. I think that's pretty cool considering that we're separated by hundreds of millions of years of evolution. And this is just one family of spiders. Spider eyes come in lots of different numbers, arrangements, shapes, and sizes. Each combination is perfectly suited to a unique way of living spider life. But jumping spider eyes with those highly adapted telescopes and powerful motion sensors, they're unique
The
not just
Andy
among
Ogre
their
is an ogre
eight-legged
spider.
cousins, but really all animals.
Wait,
Now
which
that I've
spider? Was it this one? He looks like... Yeah, that one. He kind of looks like a skull. Do you see it? Like, I see the two, like, eye holes here, and then just, like, two gigantic teeth. I don't know. Very Angie energy. Yeah, he has, like, a permanent, like, little frowny eyebrow on his head right there. He looks like something from Banjo and Kazooie. Or Banjo-Kazooie.
Shapes and size of living spider life. But jumping spider eyes with those highly adapted telescopes.
Sorry, can I talk about how much I love that this movement? This bit of the movement? Because I just love the look up, like the motion that he does. Like
Each combination is perfectly suited to a unique way of living spider life. But
this one's cool, just
with those highly adapted telescopes and powerful motion sensors, they're unique.
It looks like some inverse kinematics. I love it.
Really all animals. Now that I've learned how they see, I think these guys might have the best eyes, like of all the eyes. It's just one example of
how do they take the wax off the
things
spider
in
heads?
really small packages. I mean, literally right under our noses. They are adorable and awesome, and I hope everyone else appreciates them a little bit more. Maybe, like me, you've fallen in love with the cats of the spider world. Stay curious.
Tiny spider.
Ahoy, matey! I'm a pirate. The newest show over on PBS Origins will take you on an enlightening voyage through the pirate history that you've been missing. It's called Rogue History. It unravels the historical...
What are the spiders of the cat world? What does that mean, though? Also, hold on. Let's watch... Hold on. Jumping spider dance. I want to see the... Yes! I want to see these guys.
This male
Watch this.
spider is the size of a grain of rice.
Please look at him.
He's perfectly at home in a lawn that resembles his natural grassland.
Are you guys ready for, like, the best performance of all time?
He has superb eyesight, which helps in his search for a mate.
Oh.
And there she is, a female peacock spider. To invite her to mate, he will produce a series of vibrations, known scientifically as rumble rumps.
Yeah, sure.
Sensing his movements through her legs, the female demands a suitor who can produce soothing, even vibrations.
Yo, same, though.
Anything muddled or intermittent is unacceptable.
Same, though. I relate.
But the pandemonium created by humans can make sensing vibrations very difficult.
The more that I look at him, the more he's starting to look like a mech to me or something. Just with how those eyes are.
Fortunately, he has another tactic.
He looks like a mech, dude. Oh, he's waving. Hello.
Divert her attention from all else in the garden.
Yeah.
Eyes locked, the enchantment begins.
I love this. He looks like a Star Wars, like,
She praises the dance,
mech or something.
all its colorful splendor.
I love it.
As his routine becomes increasingly vigorous. But her head is easily turned.
Oh, yo! Instant turnaround. Man got denied.
Muscles in to try his luck.
Oh no.
She strikes in less than a tenth of a second.
Did he die?
And injects a lethal dose of venom into his brain. The rival is now not a mate, but a meal.
Rip. Hey, he interrupted the other guy's dancing solo. He must die. I like how the other male even trying to move the other dude out of the way. He knew. Yeah, he knows. Watch, he's gonna.
Our suitor once more steps into the line of fire.
He's gonna do it again. He's trying for it. Look at him go. I'm glad the music really makes this.
He must mesmerize. Or die.
I just love that he just the little wave he does. It's so entertaining to me.
Distance, he gears up for the final flourish.
Touch. 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 Yo, they're touching.
One mistake now will cost him his life.
Yo, is my man gonna get some?
While his front legs rotate her abdomen into position,
Okay.
he gathers his sperm and passes it into her reproductive organ.
Okay, that's a little forceful, but. Yo!
Works of nature allow him to thrive in this suburban environment.
He did it!
He can either tap dance or use his dazzling good looks to overcome disturbance from his noisy neighbors.
My man's, he did it. And he didn't even have to die for it. Good for him.
There are over 50 different species of peacock spider, each dancing their own routine. Many in the gardens and green spaces of Australia's cities.
Yep, that sure is Australia. Okay, we're moving on to cool big machinery things. So I found this video and I thought it was cool. It was about helicopters in the military and how these helicopters land on ships. You know, because ships are rocking, rolling, and moving.
It may surprise you, but helicopters can routinely and safely land on the flight deck of smaller ships in rough seas while the ship is not only moving, but also rolling from
I also never really thought about the logistics of this because it's very complicated.
The landing is a bit easier than you might think, thanks to the bear trap. That said, sometimes things can go wrong. For that reason, there are two standard emergency procedures for helicopters that cannot land on the deck of a ship. But there's also a third option, a non-standard one, I must say, and it's not what you think.
Okay. Well, it's overboard.
Ship motion and sea states all affect helicopter landings at sea. Moreover, the airwake from a ship's superstructure can also impact helicopter performance. These and other factors are combined into Ship Helicopter Operating Limits, or SHOL, or S-HOL.
S-HOL.
SHOL is a polar plot of acceptable conditions in which performing flight operations is considered safe. Stay within these operating limits and a helicopter should be able to land safely. But back in the day, landing a helicopter in rough seas was considered to be outside of the operating limits and therefore was not a practice. In the mid-1950s, navies were looking to introduce ship-based helicopters for specific missions, but not being able to land those helicopters in high seas put a dent into those plans. That is until the late 1950s and early 1960s, when the Royal Canadian Navy started experimenting with a device that became known as a bear trap. A bear trap is a rectangular device that allows helicopters to depart and land from smaller ships, such as frigates and destroyers, in a wide range of conditions. The invention of bear trap permitted the operation of helicopters on smaller vessels in rough seas, up to sea state 6, allowing them to handle 30 degrees of roll and 9 degrees of pitch during day and night. Following the success of Canadians with the bear trap, other navies, including the Royal Navy and the US Navy, adopted similar technologies. A Canadian bear trap works as follows. A probe is attached to a cable which is lowered from the helicopter to the flight deck. The flight deck crew, then using their bare hands, attach the cable through the center of the bear trap to a winch below the flight deck. The cable is kept under constant tension, which is controlled by an automatic hydraulic system. This synchronizes the ship with the helicopter. When the pilot and the landing signal officer are comfortable that the motion of the helicopter and the ship is relatively stable, the pilot decreases the power and the LSO increases the cable's tension. As the pilot flies the helicopter down, the winch pulls the helicopter's main probe into the center of the bear trap, which is then closed. Bear trap not only can catch and secure the helicopter in place, but it can also move the aircraft in and out of the hangar using a rail system. The original bear trap system, even though very helpful,
so it just basically has like they tether it to the ship.
Required the flight deck crew to be on the deck to handle the cable. In stormy conditions, there was a risk of man overboard. That's why more advanced versions of the bear trap were developed, like Curtiss-Wright's advanced handling technology known as Assist. Assist uses an optical positioning system that continuously tracks and monitors the exact position of the helicopter relative to the designated landing area. As the helicopter touches down, it is immediately secured using the bear trap, and then aligned and traversed into the hangar without requiring any personnel on deck.
Automated, very cool.
Some navies refer to bear trap as Recovery Assist Secure and Traverse, or RAST, or McTaggart Trigon System. While multiple versions of Recovery Assist exist, most rely on a grappling device or a probe that's secured when the helicopter lands and the bear trap is closed. An alternative to the bear trap is a deck lock system, which uses a steel grid in the middle of the flight deck.
It's a lot of things.
Over the grid, waiting for the right moment to descend. Once landed, a locking harpoon is deployed, which engages the hydraulic actuator system that pulls the helicopter onto the deck. The benefit of the system is that it doesn't require any personnel to approach the helicopter, especially during rough seas.
So they just kind of like
a version
drop it in and just kind of like
utilizes a harpoon mechanism. Was developed in the UK back in the 1970s.
Oh.
Tested on this moving platform.
It just kind of stabs itself into the ground.
Is that it can rotate the helicopter 360 degrees, which simplifies handling. For smaller surface combatants that rely on helicopters, bear trap and other similar systems have strategic importance. In 2014, the Japanese government expressed concerns about a French company that sold their system to China. A few years later, in 2017, Japan developed the first system that could automatically land a helicopter on a moving ship.
Of course it's Japan.
This system
of
relies
course.
on GPS navigation to get close to the ship. Then, the laser sensors are activated on both vessels, which calculate the relative position of the helicopter to the moving ship with an error range of just a few inches. This allows the helicopter to land safely and automatically.
Lasers.
All this said, there are scenarios under which helicopters cannot land on the flight deck, whether it's a helicopter malfunction or an issue on the flight deck. Sadly, there have been attempted landings that have resulted in fatalities. Emergencies cannot always be prevented.
There he
Emergency
goes.
drills can increase the odds of survival.
There they go.
The first alternative to landing on the ship is to land somewhere else. Of course, this may not always be possible. But since helicopters can be refueled from the ship while still airborne, the refueling can increase the helicopter's range to its maximum, which in some cases can provide an alternative landing area somewhere else. Helicopter in-flight refueling, or HIFR, begins when the helicopter lowers a bag attached to a cable onto the flight deck. The refueling crew then attach the fuel hose to the cable, which in turn is hoisted back onto the heli and hooked up to the fuel tank. Once fueling is done, the hose is lowered and the helicopter flies away. In case you're wondering why there was a bag attached to the cable, the bag is used to pull up a fuel sample that is visually inspected by the flight crew for fuel contaminants. The weight of the bag also prevents the hoist cable from swinging around as it's being lowered onto the flight deck.
I like how he has a stick to grab the cable too.
When landing on a ship is not possible, the second option is to land on water. This is what happened during a replenishment mission where a CH-46 Sea Knight experienced an engine failure over the deck of USNS Spica. The pilot immediately reacted by releasing the load and clearing the deck. Next, by relying on auto-rotation, the pilot was able to successfully land the helicopter on water. The Sea Knight capsized to the right as the crew escaped the fast-sinking vehicle.
That was a pretty good landing, actually.
Thanks to the emergency egress training that the crew would have previously received. This was also one of the first times that HEATS bottles were used by the helicopter crew in a real-life emergency. Finally,
like pressurized
the
air
third
things.
emergency option, and this is quite a rare one. But what do you do when multiple helicopters have to land on a ship and there's only room for one? This situation, in fact, came up when the United States was evacuating its troops from Vietnam. As the evacuation fleet was sailing away, several South Vietnamese helicopters approached the ship, and they were packed with refugees who were trying to escape. In a humanitarian effort, the helicopters were allowed to land, one at a time. That's right, after each landing, the crew skidded the helicopter off the ship to make room for the next chopper to land. In some cases, the pilot dropped off their passengers, then crash-landed in water near the ship to be rescued.
They just kind of
This was
yeet
impressive,
that.
which it was.
It's kind of
I
neat.
should remind you that during these evacuations, a Cessna 01 dropped a note on the deck of the American aircraft carrier USS Midway. The note read, "Can you move these helicopters to the other side? I can land on your runway. I can fly 1 hour more. We have enough time to move. Please rescue me. Major Buong, wife and 5 child." That was a Vietnamese pilot and his family. Midway's commanding officer ordered the clearing of the landing area, where an estimated $10 million worth of UH-1 Huey helicopters were pushed overboard. Major Buong safely touched down, becoming the first South Vietnamese Air Force fixed-wing pilot to ever land on a carrier. Another Cessna 01 was also recovered by USS Midway later that afternoon. If
No
you'd
cap?
like to talk to us
Very
live,
pog.
consider joining our Discord server, where we do Q&A.
Like, I'm not like a military person, but just seeing the tech and the stuff that like the logistics behind it is always so interesting to me. But that was cool. I like that. All right. Let's see here. Let me just quickly do something. All right. Oh, this one was from Brandon as well. The ingenious design of the aluminum beverage can. It's about soda cans. It's very cool about soda cans.
The ingenious design of the aluminum beverage can. Every year, nearly 500 billion of these cans are manufactured. That's about 15,000 per second. So many that we overlook the can's superb engineering. Let's start with why
Too many.
it's shaped like it is.
Too many
Why the
cans.
cylinder? An engineer might like to make a spherical can. It has the smallest surface area for a given volume, and so it uses the least amount of material. And it also has no corners, and so no weak points, because the pressure in the can uniformly stresses the walls. But a sphere is not practical to manufacture, and of course, it'll roll off the table. Also, when packed as closely as possible, only 74% of the total volume is taken up by the product. The other 26% is void space, which goes unused when transporting the cans or in a store display. An engineer could solve this problem by making a cuboid-shaped can.
Cube.
It sits on a table, but it's
I want the spherical Coke. Well, you can get the spherical Coke from Disney World. They have those.
And require very thick walls, but the cuboid surpasses the sphere in packing efficiency. It has almost no wasted space, although at the sacrifice of using more surface area to contain the same volume as the sphere. So, to create a can, engineers use a cylinder, which has elements of both shapes. From the top, it's like a sphere, and from the side, it's like a cuboid.
Hybrid.
A cylinder has a maximum packing factor of about 91%, not as good as the cuboid, but better than the sphere. Most important of all, the cylinder can be rapidly manufactured. The can begins as this disc called a blank, punched from an aluminum sheet about 3/10 of a millimeter thick. The first step starts with a drawing die, on which sits the blank and then a blank holder that rests on top. We'll look at a slice of the die so we can see what's happening. A cylindrical punch presses down on the die, forming the blank into a cup. This process is called drawing. This cup is about 88 millimeters in diameter, larger than the final can, so it's redrawn. That process starts with this wide cup and uses another cylindrical punch and a redrawing die. The punch presses the cup through the redrawing die and transforms it into a cup with a narrower diameter, which is a bit taller. This redrawn cup is now the final diameter of the can, 65 millimeters, but it's not yet tall enough. A punch pushes this redrawn cup through an ironing ring. The cup stays the same diameter as it becomes taller and the walls thinner. If we watch this process again up close, you see the initial thick wall and then the thinner wall after it's ironed. Ironing occurs in 3 stages, each progressively making the walls thinner and the can taller. After the cup is ironed, the dome on the bottom is formed. This requires a convex doming tool and a punch with a matching concave indentation. As the punch presses the cup downward into the doming tool, the cup bottom then deforms into a dome. That dome reduces the amount of metal needed to manufacture the can. The dome bottom uses less material than if the bottom were flat.
Wait, what?
A dome is an arch revolved around its center.
Wait, how?
The curvature of the arch
It's the same amount of material.
Vertical load into horizontal forces, allowing a dome to withstand greater pressure than a flat beam. On the dome, you might notice 2 large numbers. These debossed numbers are engraved on the doming tool. The first number signifies the production line in the factory, and the second number signifies the body maker number. The body maker is the machine that performs the redrawing, ironing, and doming processes. These numbers help troubleshoot production problems in the factory. In that factory, the manufacturing of a can takes place at a tremendous rate. These last 3 steps, redrawing, ironing, and doming, all happen in one continuous stroke in only a 1/7 of a second. The punch moves at a maximum velocity of 11 meters per second and experiences a maximum acceleration of 45 Gs.
Oh, that's
this
fast.
process runs continuously for 6 months or around 100 million cycles before the machine needs servicing. Now, if you look closely at the top of the can body, you see that the edges are wavy and uneven. These irregularities occur during the forming. To get a nice, even edge, about 6 millimeters is trimmed off of the top. With an even top, the can can now be sealed. But before that sealing occurs, a colorful design is printed on the outside. The term of art in the industry is decoration. The inside also gets a treatment. A spray-coated epoxy lacquer separates the can's contents from its aluminum walls. This prevents the drink from acquiring a metallic taste and also keeps acids in the beverage from dissolving the aluminum. The next step forms the can's neck, the part of the can body that tapers inward. This necking requires 11 stages. The forming starts with a straight-walled can. The top is brought slightly inward, and then this is repeated further up the can wall until the final diameter is reached. The change in neck size at each stage is so subtle that you can barely tell a difference between one stage and the next. Each one of these stages works by inserting an inner die into the can body, then pushing an outer die, called the necking sleeve, around the outside. The necking sleeve retracts, the inner die retracts, and the can moves to the next stage. The necking is drawn out over many different stages to prevent wrinkling or pleating of the thin aluminum. Since the 1960s, the diameter of the can end has become smaller by 6 millimeters, from 60 millimeters to 54 millimeters today. This seems a tiny amount, but the aluminum can industry produces over 100 billion cans a year, so that 6 millimeter reduction saves at least 90 million kilograms of aluminum annually. That amount would form a solid cube of aluminum 32 meters on a side. Compare that to a 7/8
Big cube.
streamliner with a
Big
6
cube.
wingspan.
Yay.
After the neck has been formed, the top is flanged. That is, it flares out slightly and allows the end to be secured to the body, which brings us to the next brilliant design feature, the double seam. On older steel cans, manufacturers welded or soldered on the ends. This often contaminated the can's contents. In contrast, today's cans use a hygienic double seam, which can also be made faster. This can is cut in half so you can see the cross-section of the double seam. To create the seam, a machine uses two basic operations. The first curls the end of the can cover around the flange of the can body. The second operation presses the folds of the metal together to form an airtight seal. While the operations themselves are simple, they require high precision. Parts misaligned by a small fraction of a millimeter cause the seam to fail. In addition to the clamping of the end and can body, a sealing compound ensures that no gas escapes through the double seam.
Oh, okay, there's a compound
The compound
too.
is applied as a liquid, then hardens to form a gasket. The end, attached immediately after the can is filled, traps gases inside the can to create pressures of about 30 psi, or 2 times atmospheric pressure. In soda, carbon dioxide produces the pressure. In non-carbonated drinks like juices, nitrogen is added. So why is a beverage can pressurized? Because the internal pressure creates a strong can despite its thin walls. Squeeze a closed, pressurized can, it barely gives. Then squeeze an empty can. It flexes easily. The can walls are thin, only 75 microns thick, and they're flimsy. But the internal pressure of a sealed can pushes outwards equally and so keeps the wall in tension. This tension is key. The thin wall acts like a chain. In compression, it has no strength, but in tension, it's very strong. The internal pressure strengthens the cans so that they can be safely stacked. A pressurized can easily supports the weight of an average human adult. It also
I would never do that.
The can
That would scare
doesn't
me.
need the corrugations
Oy.
like in this unpressurized steel food can. Well, initially pressurized to about 2 atmospheres, a can may experience up to 4 atmospheres of internal pressure in its lifetime due to elevated temperatures, and so the can is designed to withstand up to 6 atmospheres or 90 psi before the dome or the end will buckle. Why is there a tab on the end of the can? It seems a silly question. How else would you open it? But originally cans didn't have tabs. Very early steel cans were called flat tops for pretty obvious reasons. You use a special opener to puncture a hole to drink from,
Yeah, it seems like
and a hole to vent.
not good.
In the 1960s, the pull tab was invented so that no opener was needed. The tab worked like this. You lift up this ring to vent the can, and pull the tab to create the opening. Easy enough, but now you've got this loose tab. The cans ask you to please don't litter, but sadly these pull tabs got tossed on the ground where the sharp edges of the tabs cut the bare feet of beachgoers or they harmed wildlife. So the beverage can industry responded by inventing the modern stay-on tab. This little tab involved clever engineering. The tab starts as a second-class lever. This is like a wheelbarrow because the tip of the tab is the fulcrum and the rivet the load. The effort is being applied on the end. But here's the genius part. The moment the can vents, the tab switches to a first-class lever, which is like a seesaw, where the load is now at the tip and the fulcrum is the rivet. You can see clearly how the tab, when working as a wheelbarrow, lifts the rivet. In fact, part of the reason this clever design works is because the pressure inside the can helps to force the rivet up, which in turn depresses the outer edge of the top until it vents the can, and then the tab changes to a seesaw lever. Looking from the inside of the can, you can see how the tab first opens near the rivet. If you try to simply force the scored metal section into the can using the tab as a first-class lever with the rivet as the fulcrum throughout, you'd be fighting the pressure inside the can. The tab would be enormous and expensive. If you'd like to learn more about the entire life cycle of the aluminum can, watch this animated video by Rexam that describes can manufacturing and recycling. A typical aluminum can today contains about 70% recycled material. Also, Discovery's How It's Made has some great footage of the manufacturing machinery. Here are 2 different stepwise animations of the entire can forming process.
Cans.
And lastly, these are 2 detailed animations of the cup drawing and redrawing processes. The aluminum beverage can is so ubiquitous that it's easy to take for granted. But the next time you take a sip from one, consider the decades of ingenious design required to create this modern engineering marvel. I'm Bill Hemmig, the engineer guy.
I remembered this video. It was
Thanks to Rexam for providing.
He does such a good like a good explanation of what's going on, and it is so good. I love his stuff. I honestly wish I watched more of his stuff, but some of the engineering concepts are a little bit too simple for me, unfortunately. But like, I think it's great. Okay, I'll be right back for our next video. I just need to go to the bathroom real quick. Hold up. I'll give you guys some music. And I will be right back. Back. I'm back. Like, Lunar, I think I know that the video you posted, it is 45 minutes long. It's about, I know it's about Dragonfire, right? It is 45 minutes long, dude. So I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry. Anyway, so here's the next video vid. How Americans are tricked into buying fake food. I'm very concerned because I eat food. What could possibly be fake?
So you think this is olive oil, right? Wrong. Well,
What is
maybe
it?
some of it is, but this is actually a classic example of food fraud.
Fraud.
Extra virgin olive oils are being switched out with cheap ones.
And fraudulent to sell something labeled as something else.
Why is this fish being mislabeled? Your Parmesan cheese products do not contain any Parmesan cheese.
There was no one brand that stood out as
Yo.
Wow, so we can't eat anything.
I guarantee you, anytime a product can be passed off as something more expensive.
Parmesan doesn't have Parmesan. Yo, I'm so curious now. Let's go. How bad is this?
Not only harms consumers' wallets, it puts their health and safety at risk.
We might not know the overall impact of food fraud because so much of what fraudsters do is hidden from us and has been for centuries.
Some estimates say food fraud affects at least 1% of the global food industry, at a cost as high as $40 billion a year, according to the Food and Drug Administration.
Grocery Manufacturers of America estimated that 10% of the commercially available food in the United States is adulterated. That's
How?
10. It means if you're not on that 8-item or less checkout line, you've got something in your cart when you leave the supermarket that's probably bogus.
Here's
How?
fake food sits secretly in our kitchen cabinets.
How?
According to the FDA, food fraud is considered economically motivated adulteration, or EMA.
It's a monetary impact to the consumer and to the food manufacturers, but it's also a potential public safety, public health impact. It robs us of nutrients and can kill people and has done.
Larry Olmsted researched food fraud for years and published his book, Real Food, Fake Food, in 2016.
As I worked on this book, my definition of fake food became anytime what you buy is not what you think you're buying. Doesn't really matter whether it's legal or illegal. It's where you're being tricked. You're buying something that's not what you think it is.
The worst offenders can include seafood, meat, dairy, honey, alcohol, spices.
The fraud happens more with more
other
expensive foods. Totally makes sense, right? There's a higher margin.
Take your extra virgin olive oil as an example. Fraud usually occurs here when a cheaper oil is added to the more expensive oil, and the label still reads 100% extra virgin olive oil. That's food fraud.
That's also just false advertising, isn't it?
Adulterated for thousands of years because it is of high value and it is sought out.
They might flavor it with beta carotene and maybe color it with a little chlorophyll to make it a little more green. And so then you've got a lower quality, cheaper oil.
So both of these olive oils I got at the grocery store, and both of them are the store brand, but one cost way more than the other. This one had a label of 100% Mediterranean blend of extra virgin olive oil. So the olives were sourced from a bunch of different European countries, and it said it was packed in Italy, and there was no expiration date. And when I purchased this one was a 100% California extra virgin olive oil. First pressed, cold pressed, unfiltered, no artificial colors, preservatives, or flavors. And this one had an expiration date. It said that these olives were harvested in October, November 2022, and that it would be good on your shelf until August 2024.
Okay.
And it was much more expensive. Roughly twice as much as this olive oil. And this one had way more information about where this olive oil came from. Now let's look at the spice market as another one that's vulnerable to fraud. Think of an expensive spice, like saffron. This tiny amount cost me $20 at the store. Saffron can be bulked up with some other material like plant stems and sold as the same, according to the FDA.
Like basil and chili powder from a range of different brands.
Anything that's kind of colored orange, brown, and ground up can be passed off as turmeric.
It's the ultimate bait and switch.
True, honestly.
And then there's fish. The FDA says seafood fraud can occur when a less expensive species of fish is substituted for a more expensive species. After all, it's kind of hard to know what fish you're buying, right?
If you're an experienced chef or fishmonger, you can look at like a red snapper fillet and tell whether it's red snapper, but 99% of consumers can't. You know, most of the fish we eat is white fish. Every fillet looks pretty much the same, which is why there's so much substitution. The FDA is mandated by law to inspect 2% of the imported seafood, which is, I think, a very, very low
Just
bar.
2?
In fact, the U.S. imports as much as 85% of its fish.
But federal fisheries enforcement is serious business. Agents from NOAA and U.S. Customs tear open a container filled with frozen fish from Thailand.
Fish inspection time.
For fraud.
First, it's important to understand the matrix that food fraud lives in. There's intentional and unintentional types of food risk. Unintentional risks include food safety and quality, like accidental foodborne illnesses.
CDC estimates about 50 million people a year contract a foodborne illness. Only 20%, 1 in 5 of those can be identified. So there's 40 million people a year getting sick from something they ate that we don't know what it is, and a good guess would be that fraud has something to do with that.
Then there's intentional. That's where food fraud is alongside food defense.
What's
the difference is fraud is motivated by economic gain, and defense is motivated by harm.
If you have a ton of coffee and you can turn that into 1.2 tons by adding some cheap filler to it, you've just increased your profits by 20%. And a lot of these products pass through a lot of hands. They go from small growers to big trucks to tankers to boats to processing plants. It's not necessarily like this big company that's selling you coffee that's ripping you off. It can happen in a lot of ways along the way.
Even the FDA says it can't estimate how often this fraud happens or its economic impact. Over the last 10 years, the most common fraud committed is lying about an animal's origin and dilution or substitution, both ranking at 16%.
Why is use of non-food substance at 14?
And substitution are exactly
Oh
the
no.
same. Perhaps
Oh no.
somewhere along the supply chain, the real expensive process of refining something like fresh olives is ignored. Maybe a little canola oil is added instead. Then there's the removal of value, when an ingredient or part of a food is intentionally left out, taken out, or substituted altogether. And that substitute can be a non-food substance. That's the 14% of the recorded food fraud incidents.
What does
using
non-food
substances.
substance mean?
The pandemic has
Oy.
given us a chance to focus on supply chains and forced us to.
For example, during the pandemic, labeling fraud really spiked in 2021 to 21% of the types of fraud that were committed and recorded.
Wow.
You know, if we knew all about it, why hasn't it been solved? The key was we weren't focusing on prevention. Food fraud prevention, if we do it right, is boring. We're the fire marshal checking exits and smoke alarms, not catching the bad guys.
The U.S. has laws in place to ensure food safety. That's part of what the FDA does today.
Basically, all food fraud, all product fraud is illegal under one law or another, somehow.
Before the FDA existed, manufacturers could add basically whatever they wanted into the food. Think of Upton Sinclair's
Oh, here we go. The jungle.
book was published in 1906.
Aye.
That same year, food safety regulation began with the Meat Inspection Act and the Pure Food and Drugs Act, which outlawed adulterated and misbranded food items.
To protect consumers,
This ultimately led to the creation of the FDA.
the Food and Drug Administration.
Yay.
Since then, laws have hit the books to further food safety protocols, like the Food Safety Modernization Act signed into law in 2011.
And then horse meat hit.
The fraud was on a grand scale.
And then horse meat.
Horse meat was blended into beef in the UK. across Europe.
To
Oh.
unsuspecting supermarkets for a period of 8 months in 2020.
Oh, what the hell?
And that was great wake-up call.
Some companies purposely mislead on labels.
Prosecuting the fraudsters committing the crime can be tricky. After all, they're purposely trying to avoid that detection. But criminals are caught. Like in 2016.
Product labeled Market Pantry 100% Parmesan contained cheaper Swiss and cheddar cheese and an organic filler called cellulose, which can be derived from wood pulp.
Castle Cheese was caught adding wood pulp and cheddar to its grated Parmesan that they sold as 100% Parmesan cheese.
The FDA does allow fillers
had
like
no-
cellulose in cheese, but
no
it can only
okay.
make up 4% of the total ingredients.
The president of the company got a $5,000 fine, 200 hours of community service, and 3 years of probation.
That's
For its
it?
part, the Food and Drug Administration says its
What?
job is to make sure food doesn't hurt you.
That should be
not
more.
Police the labels.
Fraud is tough for the consumer in terms of food because it's difficult. They don't have a lab in their kitchen.
The Food Fraud Prevention Think Tank has a 5-question survey consumers can use when shopping for food.
Ooh,
1,
important.
what type of product is it?
Be aware of product that you put on you, in you, or plug in the wall.
2, quality.
True.
Can you recognize the difference between the products? If you can't easily tell the difference, that makes you more vulnerable to fraud.
If I drink scotch, I couldn't tell you if it's a difference between a $50 bottle and a $5,000 bottle. So I know I could be deceived at that point.
3, supplier. Do you know the retailer or the supplier? And do you trust them?
So when you turn that box of cereal or bottle of juice over and read the back, there's a lot of information there that's required by law that's helpful to the consumer.
And then question 4, are you buying this item online? The supply chain can be shrouded in more mystery when shopping online. So how did you find out about this website? Is it reputable?
But it depends on how you find that supplier.
And finally 5, complain. Okay, it's
Complain.
The Food Fraud Prevention Think Tank says if the retailer is legit, they will want to know.
I think manufacturers can be the victims as well.
The FDA also relies on consumers' reports.
In recent decades, fraudsters have gotten more sophisticated in the techniques they use to fake the food products. And that means that our detection methods and our test methods and standards have to be better at detecting fraud.
That's why the U.S. Pharmacopoeia Convention provides a framework for organizations to detect its vulnerabilities.
Fascinating.
We have food
Also
fraud mitigation
terrifying.
guidance. So it is a supply chain risk management tool to really take a look at which ones are the more risky products suspected to be adulterated.
Sometimes it feels like this is not that big of a deal. But the more fraudsters are able to achieve, the more we end up paying in the end as consumers.
These cases rarely result in criminal penalties. If you want to be like a drug dealer and import heroin and you get arrested on a large scale, you're going to go to jail. But if you can make $80 million importing adulterated honey, and then you're going to get a slap on the wrist and some fines, why wouldn't you do food instead of drugs if there's no basically criminal downside to it? So as long as we don't take it seriously, why should the perpetrators take it seriously?
What we want is the food industry just to be focused on making food and not have to worry about looking over our shoulder, checking different suppliers. And that's going to impact more food being produced, better food, safer food, less expensive food. There's plenty of things for us to worry about in the world today, and food fraud should not be one of those.
It was a good video. It was neat. Food fraud. Okay, so I think this might be the last video, since we kind of caught up. This one's about, this one's a new concept, I think, for me, is called heartlining for roller coasters. And I don't know that much about roller coasters, so. What is this?
The body experiences many different kinds of forces. These can include airtime and weightlessness, or negative Gs,
Whee!
positive Gs that make you weigh more, and lateral Gs that shift you from side to side. Sometimes these forces can be felt going through turns and inversions, however they aren't generally painful. How is it that a ride can exert large amounts of these forces on your body without making you feel uncomfortable? The answer to that question is actually quite simple.
Yeah, how can roller coasters do that without killing me?
Have you ever noticed when entering an element on a roller coaster, the track sometimes turns slightly in the opposite direction of where it ends up going? That small turn in what is seemingly the wrong direction is what keeps you from coming off of most coasters with a headache. The concept of heartlining was first brought about by a man named Werner Stengel. He wanted to have the track rotate and turn around the rider rather than around itself. One of the elements that first comes to mind when thinking about heartlining is the heartline roll. This element is basically a zero-G roll that stays on the same level the whole time and appears to have a circular shape. A perfect example is Hydra the Revenge at Dorney Park in Pennsylvania. Right out of the station, Hydra goes into a heartline roll inversion. This roll has perfect shaping, being only as tall as the train so as not to move riders too far up or down and ruin the element. Watching from off-ride also illustrates how the riders stay in one place. Another example of heartlining is the element I described as similar to a heartline roll, a zero-G roll. And the roll that has the most noticeable heartlining is on a B&M dive coaster known as Baron 1898. The train twists around in such a smooth motion that it seems as though the track were butter. But what if this roll wasn't heartlined? What if no element was heartlined? That, my friends, would not be fun. If you want an example of what that would look like, look no further than the Golden Horse SLC. This model has a zero-G roll, however the rider is thrown around the track. This makes for a jarring experience that will undoubtedly smash your head around on the hard restraints. Just looking at it, you can tell something's wrong, as the track sits in a straight line, banking only around itself like a selfish brat. Some of you may be thinking, I think I get it. Heartlining good, no heartlining bad. And you would sort of be right, because there are some cases in which having no heartlining can still make for a fun and comfortable ride. The best models to show this are wing coasters, of both B&M and Intamin varieties. Many of these coasters have rolls on them that look like heartline rolls, but have no heartlining. These elements are called inline twists. The name makes just as much sense as heartlining. The track twists in a straight line. Why does this work on wing coasters, though, and not average sit-down loopers? The answer to that question is in the model name, wing. On a wing coaster, you sit off to the left or right side of the track, meaning when taking an inline twist, you have a much wider radius than if you were sitting directly on top of the track. This wider space reduces how tight the roll is, and therefore reduces the forces experienced. The same concept works for zero-G rolls on some B&M wing coasters, like X-Flight at Six Flags Great America. One final thing to mention is aerodynamics. Arrow was an extremely impactful and legendary company in the coaster industry, known for their innovation, and they had a strange banking system. Arrow does not heartline elements, however they didn't exactly not heartline elements either. Most of their turns bank before necessary, so that you are already leaning when you enter a turn, which results in a sometimes whiplash-inducing transition.
Yeah.
However,
Ooh.
after that transition, the element is fine. The turning and banking makes sense once you enter the element. Whether this system is good or not is up to you, but personally, I'm kinda in between on it. To sum it all up, heartlining is a concept that was made to reduce the forces put on your body as you ride a roller coaster, making you feel much more comfortable. Coasters without heartlining generally leave you feeling more nauseated and in pain, unless it is a wing coaster, which doesn't need heartlining due to having wider trains. Aero coasters also remain as an outlier though. Next time you get on Planet Coaster, please, for the sake of all of us, turn up your banking offset. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing, and I will see you guys next time.
That was interesting. So it was like, I didn't really think about it, and now that kind of explains why you have like a height requirement, because if you're like too big or too small, it would kind of screw you over, wouldn't it? Yeah, I think that's how it works. Huh. Anyway, unfortunately, that's all for today. I'm ending a little bit early so I can catch my Z's. My snoozies. Let's see here. So next stream is going to be, of course, back on Tuesday. I haven't figured out a schedule yet, but yeah, maybe I might do some like Tetrio streams on the weekend. But you know, guild housework is pretty busy, so I can't guarantee that. But make sure you guys say before you go. Have a wonderful rest of your night. Bye bye now.